Welcome to the latest edition of the Moms Playbook podcast. My name is Heather James, and as always, I'm joined by my pod partner, Jasmine Zor. In each episode, created by sports moms for sports moms, we dive into the intricacies of raising a student athlete, from managing practice schedules and travel arrangements to insider tips on recruiting, all while balancing our careers. We know each sport has its unique challenges, and we aim to explore and understand them all. Along the way, we share stories, enjoy some laughter, because, as moms, we understand the chaos, but wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Let's jump in.
We're excited to have Cheryl Fox here today. Cheryl's a mom of three, her son being Miles Fox. Miles is a defensive tackle for the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the Canadian Football League. He played college football for Old Dominion and Wake Forest, and he was a vital part of the 2021 Wake Forest ACC Atlantic Championship team. Welcome, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us. So before we get started, tell us a little more about yourself.
All right. Miles is 28 years old. He started playing football when he was 8 years old with the Gwinnett, with the little Gwinnett League that's here. He went on to, play for Collins Hill High School. And once he graduated from Collins Hill, he had several offers, one of them being Old Dominion. And later on, he would go to Wake Forest. During that time, he was a D tackle. He started all the games in high school. He was a little undersized. So the thing about it is that with D tackles, even though that undersized, that height gives them a little bit more leverage, they really want you to be like Sue if you were to get into league or anything. So we were like, let's grow. But nobody really mentioned any of that in high school because he was such a good player, and he was just a great captain because he has great character, he has great leadership skills. And so, that part kind of went to the wayside for a minute until it got to his senior year. And well, actually junior year, he got his first offer from South Alabama. But when it got to his senior year and everybody started, getting the big offers, he was getting a lot of FCS offers, which is football championship schools and not football bowl.
So now, Cheryl, did he attend a lot of camps throughout the years? Or when you did that, they always say pass the eyeball test and what have you. So what kind of feedback did you get with that specifically? And how did you deal with that with him?
He went to a lot of camps. He went to a lot of the Nike camps. He would always go to the Nike camp every year. He went to Rivals camp, and in that one, they watch you and they do eyeball you and they put down your height and everything. But he was always a really good, solid player because he knew the fundamentals really well. So he knew what to do and he was really solid there. They never told him, you're too short, you need to grow. We heard that from his Coach Kevin Reach. He said, we just need to get another inch out of him. If we can get another inch, he was 6'1" in high school and stuff. So if we can get another inch out of him, then he'll be good. But he did. He went to a lot of the camps. And like I said, Nike had a good camp where they would test their fundamentals. There were a few other ones, but he also went to Tennessee. He went to Alabama. He went to a lot of the other schools. He always tested well, and he always did the one-on-ones really well. So they didn't hit on the height because he always had the girth.
Right. And now how did you, when you went to go to these college camps, how did you actually get him into them? Did he get invitations, or how did you do the legwork to get him there?
We would always look to see what camps were coming up. Like he would get letters and stuff all the time. Everybody gets letters. Those letters don't mean a whole lot. It's that they recognize that you're on the team and that somebody could potentially be watching you, but it doesn't mean a whole lot. So you get 100 letters, that's great, but that doesn't determine whether or not you're going to get an offer. We looked at the schools that we wanted to go to. And then as he started receiving offers, we checked to see if they had any summer camps beforehand. But for the most part, we would go online. We would check with the schools, see if they had an O-line, D-line camp. If they did, we would sign them up, pay that $55, $75 for that camp, and we would get on the road.
Did you plan, how far out in advance did you plan? Because I know for myself, and I think Jasmine as well, because our boys played a specialized position, we attended those camps throughout the year.
Yes.
And then I know January leading into his junior year, actually his sophomore year, we would start planning. We would start looking at rosters, who was gonna need a guy
Hmm.
in my son's particular graduation year. Because again, specialized, positions, they need a lot less of the specialized guys, and they do need of the O-line and the D-line. They're gonna rotate those guys out a lot more than a special position like our guys played. So, I know for myself, I started a notebook, started looking at those rosters. I didn't wanna waste money because, as a mom, we have to plan out our schedule, our work, all of those things over the summer, to be able to hit things out. So, how did your summers look heading into those camps? How did you, as a mom, plan those things out?
Our summers were always busy. And the good thing about my family is that George always checked that stuff out too. He's a former football player and he played with University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. So he was always looking
Nice.
at all the different camps that were out there. And of course, I did all the planning, but we would all look at the camps. Miles didn't, but we would look at the camps and then we would ask Miles, which ones do you want to go to? And we would look at the ones that for him were the best. Now, when it did come for time for him to select the ones, we did always look at the depth chart because George would always tell him. I didn't know about any of this stuff at the time. I was one of those moms that at 8 years old was just sitting there talking to other moms and just laughing and kikiing. But as we got into high school, I learned the game. I started paying attention to the game and I could talk to the game about the game to anybody. And I can hold my own with conversations with men now because that's how much I've learned over the years. But that's what we would do. George would say, oh, this would be a good camp. This would be a good O-line, D-line camp. Now, in between all of this stuff, understand Miles was going every day after school to train. So he was training with Gerald Boo Mitchell, and then he moved over and started training at GSP with Earl. Earl is really good. He's had his gym forever. And Miles, even now, when he comes home, trains with Earl. But this is what he did every day after school. He continued in high school.
Now, how old was he when he started football?
Started football at 8. They wanted us to, I was going through the grocery store one day. He was 5 years old. We were going through the grocery store and he was standing at the end of my cart holding on as I pushed the thing. And then I was going through the meat section and then two guys came up to me and said, he played football? And I said, no, he's only 5. And he said, but he's going to play football. And I said, yeah, we're going to put him in there, but just not right now. And we didn't want to start him at 6 and burn him out. We thought that was just too early. So we thought 8 was a good time. In between that time, George got him the Nintendo game where he could play NFL Madden. And so he started learning the game. That's one thing about Miles is he has a great football IQ. He really does. He knows the game and he watches the game and he learns a lot about the game. And that's what helps you. You can't just play football and not know what you're doing. Some people do, and they go by that see ball, get ball, motto. But if you know more about the game, it just helps you as you're playing the game. So he has a great football IQ. That's one thing about him.
So, my son's coaching now, and he has mentioned that you can kinda tell a lot about high school program based off of the knowledge level that the young men have when they come to college. And, at college, everything is so much faster, picking up the playbook, learning everything this time of the year. Yes, it's the off season, but those kids are all in the playbook. They're learning, they're getting ready for spring. They've got to be able to step on the field and go. And he said it's really interesting to see the difference where they think their football knowledge is and then where it actually is when it comes to the college playbook and the college. Every single guy who goes to college and plays football is a different human being than they were their senior year of high school football because they have all the nutrition and the training and all that. But you gotta have that knowledge or it's gonna take you that much longer to get on the field because you just don't know. So I think that's a
Absolutely.
really great point. It's a really
Yeah,
great point. What do you think
absolutely.
about that
I
today?
I know a couple of people who were really good players in high school and well, they were good players in high school. They had the size, they had, the position and everything. When they went to college, they never played. And I think that that was because of what they knew about the game and how one in particular had a processing problem. So I get that. So when they start trying to learn the playbook, it's not as easy as they think it is. You've got to learn that actual playbook, like you said, and you've got to understand everything that's going on with other positions. Another one that we played in high school with that, he ended up going to, I think it was one of the SEC teams, and he was a linebacker. They tried to put him at the middle linebacker position, which, if anybody knows anything, the middle linebacker position pretty much is the person who tells everybody what they need to know. He needs to really have a good grasp, a good football IQ, and he couldn't do it because he didn't understand it enough. So, it's not just about getting out there and hitting people. You've got to understand, the plays, and you've got to understand what's happening on that field. That was one thing that Miles said about one of their players. His name was Big Hill. He was the middle linebacker on the team. Great player, and actually came from a family of football players. A really great player. He would, in their meetings, he would turn around to Miles when the coach was talking and they were talking about plays and stuff, and he would say, okay, so this is going to happen and that is going to happen. What are you going to do? That's the kind of stuff that he would do, just to kind of see who knew what and who knows the game and who doesn't know the game. And Miles was always able to tell him because he knows the game. So like you said, it is very important that they understand, because they do have a playbook they've got to learn. When they get out on the field, they can't make mistakes, because that can cost them a game. So people need to understand that.
And now, to get into Wake Forest, I know Miles must have had a pretty good GPA, good study skills. What was your focus? Was he a naturally good student, or um, what was your process in getting him to that ability?
He had good study habits in high school, because I had always told him, I always tell him, I said, Miles, it doesn't matter how great of a football player you are. If your grades are crap, you're not getting anything. You won't, you're a great football player, but you got crappy grades. Nobody's going to pick you up. And we had gone to Wake Forest as one of his visits, and we knew what the GPA looked like and everything. And it was the same. It was Coach Cohen, who was the same coach when we went to visit as it was when he took him. But he knew that he had to keep that GPA up. And so his GPA did help him get into Wake Forest. So he did that through the portal. And when he came to Wake Forest, he was already injured. He was still injured. He was not back on the field yet. And this was only with the plantar plate injury. As he continued to work out and get better and rehab and do all that stuff, he joined the team back on the sidelines, only working out while the team was practicing. That is when he ruptured his Achilles. On the sideline working out, he said he felt like somebody came behind him and kicked him in the back of his foot, and he ruptured his Achilles. And he was devastated, because that meant another year that he would miss. So he had not gotten a chance to even start practicing with the team, because he was on the sideline rehabbing from his first injury, and then went right into the next injury on the opposite foot, which is always what it is, because that opposite foot takes on all the pressure of the foot you're not using. So 9 times out of 10, when you injure something, it's going to be on the opposite foot. And that's what it was with him. So when he came, he still was working on his plantar plate injury, and then he got injured with the ruptured Achilles.
So let me clarify something. When you say on the sidelines, do you mean like physically on the sidelines during the games, or are you talking practice? Because a lot of people don't understand the typical college practice. They have multiple fields, and they do put the injured guys, they're out there working. They don't get practice off. They're out there working. They're doing their rehab. And quite literally, they're on the side over there doing their rehab, running their drills, working with, the PT crew, the trainers, and they're out there working. It just might not be in pads and a helmet. Sometimes they do put pads and a helmet on, but only the uppers. But they continue to work on the sideline, even if they are injured. A lot of programs will keep them involved by including them in practice and making that part of the time. So when you say he got injured, was it actually during the season or when they were still training? So it was practice time and he got hurt again.
It was practice time when they were in training. So
Man,
he never
that's
got to,
tough.
he
How
never
did
got
he
to the
handle that?
season. He was devastated. He was devastated. But one thing about him, he'll mope for a minute, but then he gets back up and he says, I've got to work. I've got to work. Because I've always told him, the motto that I've always gone through with him from high school is hard work pays off, and do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Amen.
So I always have told him, if football is what you want to do, then you concentrate and you work your butt off and concentrate your efforts doing what you're supposed to do. And so he, like I said, trained, he learned the fundamentals. He is a very good player. So he just worked hard, and he always went by that motto. Hard work pays off. He knows that if you don't work hard, to be out of there in a heartbeat. You always have to, and people have to understand as well, you may get an offer for a school, But when you get to that school, you still have to compete for that position. You have to compete every year. Just because you're a starter this year doesn't mean you're a starter next year. And that is high school. Well, it may not be as much high school, not as much, but it definitely college and in the pros. And just like it happens in NFL, it happens in the CFL. Got to
And
work.
now, after college, he tried the process into the NFL. Well, how did that work?
After college, draft day came, and he got an agent, one of the best in the business, Peter Schaefer, and he wanted to, have people over. George and I was like, well, do you think you should? Maybe not, because sometimes people have parties and nothing happens. And he was like, no, I'm gonna have somebody over. Of course, I'll get, if nothing else, I'll be able to get taken by free agency. And so we sat there for draft day and we watched and we watched and we watched. And round 6 came around and we watched. Round 7 came around and we watched. And he had his best friend there with him, who was also looking out for another friend that he knew from Auburn. And, had his best friend. I guess my nephew was there. There were like several people there. There were like 5 or 6 people that he wanted to have there. At the end, when he didn't get drafted, he waited for the call from free agency. So he was texting with his agent this whole time, texting. Other guys, Tamon Fox, got taken in free agency. Luigi got taken in free agency. So he was hearing from all his friends, but he was texting Peter. There's nothing going on. And Peter was like, I'm working, I'm trying. And one of the things that I found out when we were down in Jacksonville for the bowl game, Jasmine, we were standing on the fence waiting for them to come out. And so we were standing next to Ja'Cory John's parents. And his father said, yeah, Miles should have a good opportunity. However, he is a little old. That was the very first time that I had ever heard that, because you taking 2 injuries, it's pushing you back. Now, he was a freshman who played as a freshman at Old Dominion. So he didn't redshirt. His red shirts were medical red shirts. So he lost 2 years. So when he said that, I looked at George, I said, do they look at that for the NFL? And George said, yeah, they do. So he was 25 by the time the draft came around. He turned 25 in January. So that was one of the big things that made the difference with him. So he was still texting. And he was like, nobody's going to pull the lever with me. Nobody's going to do it. And Peter just kept saying, I'm trying. And he didn't get taken. He was devastated, even more so than that injury. So, everybody started leaving and he went downstairs and he stayed downstairs the whole rest of the evening into the middle of the next day. And he was really, really, really devastated. So what happened was, I called somebody that I knew and I was like, you think that maybe he can, get a shot with the camp or something? And he said, well, let me call some people that I know in Buffalo. And I think that's how he got a shot in the Buffalo camp. But I think they were just filling spots by this point. They knew who they had. They weren't really looking for anybody else. He went up to the Buffalo camp. At least that helped him. And the funny thing about that is right before that, he came upstairs and he, was just eating or something one morning and I was there and I just went behind him and I hugged him and he just broke down. And he said, it's just not fair. I've worked so hard. It's just not fair. And I said, I know it's not. And then after that is when he got that call for Buffalo. But before that, Peter, reached out to him. Not even Peter. I think it was one of his coaches. One of his high school coaches said, no, it was his coach at GSP. He said, Winnipeg Blue Bombers are looking at you. They really, really are interested. But that year, it was a contract year. And so they went on strike because apparently what I understand is that a lot of guys go up to the CFL and then they take the spots of the CFL players, more American players than CFL players. So it was a big contract year where they wanted to make it that CFL players got precedence and a certain number of them had to be on the field and not just filled up with a bunch of American players. So he was like, well, I don't know. We'll see. And George told him, he said, listen, after the Buffalo camp and he didn't, he played well at Buffalo. He said, I got some sacks today, but they did not keep him. They still cut him. But when he came home, George said, Miles, you need to think about the CFL because, you can sit around here waiting and seeing if somebody else is going to call you. But at least if you go to the CFL, you got a shot of playing and you got a shot of making a team. And so once that contract period was over, he got a call from BC Lions. It wasn't even the Winnipeg that got him quickly. It was the BC Lions. So he ended up having to leave really late, like late at night, early in the morning to go to BC Lions, and he made the team. So that's what happened with him there. So, but yeah, he was devastated with that, with the draft. He could, because he really thought that he was going to be able to at least make it as a free agent. That, and then he started asking questions. Why did I not make it? And they were like, there were two factors. One was your age, one was your height. So with the age and the height thing, just didn't, there are a couple of guys, only a couple of guys that were in the NFL that had his height, but they were still younger than he was. So age and height matter. So
Uncontrollables.
yeah,
He couldn't control his
uncontrollables.
height, he couldn't control his injuries,
Right.
right? And I think that's something that people forget about when it comes to making the transition is there are a lot of uncontrollable things out there that honestly determine the future of a young person when it comes to moving from the NCAA over to the pro side of things. How did one thing I think a lot of people don't understand, and I can say my son didn't attempt to go to the NFL. He knew his size he was never gonna get a shot. So, when it came to finding an agent, training for the draft, kinda what does that picture look like for a young person? What did that look like for you guys and your family? Um, and then also free agency and things of that nature, like, how does all that kind of work? Financially, I don't need to know, numbers, that's none of our business, but how does a young person prepare to do all those things to be able to get to draft day and then post draft day kind of keep going if they still believe they have a shot in something like the CFL?
So once they finish their season with the other school back in December, come January, everybody is getting ready to start training. So if you think that you are going to get a shot in the NFL, the first thing that they're going to do is get an agent. So you get an agent, and that's what Miles did. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to find a facility that they need to work out at. And a lot of the facilities take the big name guys, and what they will do is they allow them to work out there for, and they don't have to put any money into it. It's either going to be the agent that's going to pay for it, or the facility will take the hit and, bank on the fact that that person's going to get drafted and they can pay them back later. But if you do it, that if you take that road and you don't get drafted and you don't go to a team, more than likely in that contract, it shows that you've got to pay that money back. And a lot of these guys don't know that. And so they're left with a bill that can be upwards of $5,000 for training all that time. And it's not just 5,000. I think it's like probably 5,000 a month or something. I don't know. Some of these big facilities, I'm not sure how much they are. Miles stayed at GSP, and a couple of other guys. Sue came to GSP. He came and he actually worked out with Earl, and Earl even allowed him to stay with him. And I think he went to it was at the time it was the USFL, but they worked out with Earl, and Earl is crazy hard. He knows what he needs to get out of these guys because he trains NFL players. He's had coaches who were NFL players, and so he knows how to train these guys and how to get them through that time. But yes, it can cost a lot of money once you sign with that agent and go to that facility and stay at that facility January, February, March through the middle of April, almost time for the draft. So you've got to really be careful and understand what that contract is telling. Are you going to have to pay that money back if you don't get drafted? Are you going to have to pay that money back if you don't get taken in a free agency where somebody can take that money, take up those funds for you? You need to make sure you pay attention to that because you can be left holding the bag.
That's great information. That's actually I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So Miles paid as he went. We actually, paid a lump sum of it at the very beginning, and then we paid some in the middle. So we got his paid for him. And, Earl, we've known Earl forever, so he worked with us on paying it, a couple of payments. But yeah, it was still a nice chunk of change that nobody wants to, sit with after the fact and not know how you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, no, it's very nerve wracking. We've obviously all of us are, football moms. Our boys played big time college football, and watching other people go through the process. I mean, I was nervous the 3 days of the draft. I was nervous the post draft for the free agency side of things to see who was getting what. I got to be honest, I'm kind of glad it wasn't my kid because I don't know how I would have handled that side of things. Again, the uncontrollables are things that we can't prepare our kids for, but handling them, that adversity that comes from them, of course, as a mom, we can prepare our kids with that, but the uncontrollables, man.
Right. And then one thing we forgot about, pro day.
Oh yeah, how'd that go?
Yeah. His pro day actually went well. There was just one There was just one drill that he just couldn't get his handle on, and just kept messing up. And that was I think that was was that the one, the 4 cone drill? It was,
Okay.
yeah, I think it was the 4 cone drill. So it may have been that one, but his numbers actually look really good. So I don't know what happens, but yeah, they train to get to pro day so that everybody sees them at that point.
Yeah,
So
so for people that are listening that may not know, every major college program in the country has a pro day where the scouts come in, they're invited to the facilities, they go through all very specific drills. Everybody, the defensive side of guys go through the same thing at every school around the country. Cheryl mentioned the 4 cone drill. So they're looking at the speed for these things so that they can have numbers to compare. Smaller schools will send their NFL-bound guys to the bigger schools that may not, because the smaller schools don't all host those, so they'll send them. So it's not just about the combine. The combine is a limited number of invites, but, when you are on college campus, everybody who's eligible for the draft can go through pro day. My son did not participate in pro day. He, didn't need to. He knew it wasn't in his future. But now that he's coaching college football, he's part of pro day every year, getting it ready, handling those coaches, funneling in and out of the school that he's particularly at. It's exciting. Even ESPN is even hosted at some of the bigger schools that would have like a number of draftees. They show it on TV. It's really interesting. As a young mom, I think it's important to look at those kind of things to see what the NFL is looking for and kind of judge, how to prepare your son, how to like, is he going to be able to handle these type drills? Those kind of things are really important. But pro day is a big, big deal.
it is.
And it can kind of make or break some guys, especially specialists, which is where Jasmine and I, our boys played. If you have a bad pro day, um, yeah, that could be the end of it, honestly. I know other positions a little differently. Obviously, with Miles, it was a little different. So he had a great pro day that moved on to help him elevate his status and draw attention, not just from the NFL, but from the CFL.
Yeah, because there's CFL scouts there too.
Yeah,
Um,
there are, and people don't forget people forget that. I know a lot of the moms that I'm still friends with from our college days, you forget that it's not just the NFL where these guys can go make money now. We have college coaches that are leaving the country, and they're going overseas because overseas you have leagues that are expanding, and if you wanna continue to play football, it might not be NFL money, it might not be NFL notoriety, but if you wanna extend and you wanna keep playing, you can even go overseas. It's really neat, honestly.
yeah. And another thing with at pro day, all the scouts are in that room and they're talking to the coaches. So guys need to understand that the relationship that you have with your coach, or the type of player that you are, the character that you have, which understand at Wake Forest, there weren't a lot of character issues. These guys are the leaders of their teams in high school. They're the football captains. They're smart. You just don't have a lot of issues. But coach, what was his name? What was Wake Forest coach's name? I forgot.
Coach Clausen?
Coach Clausen. He was telling, he told us later, he told him, he said, listen, if you all get Miles, you're getting a great kid. He's got great character. He works really hard. You would just be getting the gym. Sometimes you just need to try, the guy, even though he may not have all the measurables, just want to, see what that person is like. He would be a great addition on your team. And if you got him, you would love him. Did it do any good? No. But I'm just
I bet
saying.
it did. I bet it did. I bet it did.
I'm just saying, it doesn't hurt to have a great relationship with your college coach, because they might be able to, get you pushed over the finish line. You never know if you have everything that everybody sees, but they're like, should I take this guy or this guy? Okay. His coach said he's a great person. That character matters. Not so much all the time, but it just does. So anyway, yeah, you want to look at that as well, that you just want to make sure that when you're on that team, that you're being the best version of yourself, in my opinion.
Jasmine and I, when, our boys were going through the camp phase of things, so you're talking what was he, like, 8th grade when he started the national camp, 7th grade? He was
Yeah.
young.
He was like 10, 11, 10, 11.
Yeah, super, super young. I
Oh, wow.
remember because he's a couple years younger than mine, and one of the things that their trainer, always pushed, always, always pushed was practicing questions when you're speaking to a coach, even going how important it was going from the high school level to the college level. So, things like asking a coach when a coach says, "Oh, so where are you from?" You can't just say the name of the city. They don't have any idea where that is. So, practicing little things to talk to a college coach and let them know exactly where you're from, having that mature conversation that you can have, handle things, right? If you can't talk to a college coach, especially a younger, maybe an assistant, like my kid's an assistant right now. So he knows if a young player can't have a conversation with him, what's it going to be like when they sit down with the head coach or the
Correct.
true
Yep.
position coach, right? So, I know personally we spent a lot of time when we were traveling to camps. We always drove if we could because selfishly that was more mom time. That I had one on one with my kid. And he was locked in the car with me, so who else is he going to talk to? Um, but we would practice questions. And so when it got to that level, right, when he was sitting down with those college coaches, we had gone over stuff, right? We had gone over the questions, so he felt comfortable. And I think even heading into the NFL, right, like you just mentioned, pro day, sitting down with those coaches, they interview everybody, right? They wanna know who you are. I think it's important to be able to just talk, right? Yes, the knowledge which we've already covered is gonna fall into that, but being able to have a conversation, talking about your character, talking about who you are, how you work is just an overseen skill that a lot of young people need, and I think even more now because we're so social media driven, you forget that and face-to-face conversations are so important, but I know with mine, we practiced in the car, and I would hear coaches, they would come to me after camp and be like, "Oh, he really was able to, like, handle himself," and I that all goes back to our boys' trainer for their particular specialty who beat this in the head of the parents to make sure your kid was prepared to have these conversations. And again, it leads right up, like you said, into NFL interviews, CFL interviews, job interviews. It's going to make them a better person.
I totally agree. And their coach, Coach Reach, used to always tell them that, listen, we know you've got your parents right there to, help you with things. He said, but when you get to a certain point, which was for them, he was speaking to them about it a lot junior year. When these coaches ask you questions, you need to answer. You need to talk to these coaches.
Yes.
Your parents should not be speaking for you at this point. So, yeah, I totally agree with everything you said because that was also told to them at a certain point that they had to do it, that
Yeah,
they
yeah,
should be doing it.
they basically told us to, when you walk up there, the parents basically take the back seat. Just stand behind and be supportive, and parents don't talk until you're actually spoken to. Let the
Exactly.
conversation be between the player and the coach. And as we did that, I mean, it became more and more comfortable for him. Like, and like we said, it'll only transcend into the workforce at some
Yep.
point.
Yep.
Certainly transcends to my kid's
Yeah.
workforce because he's still doing it and he's still taking what he got, as a seventh and eighth grader at these camps. Luckily, we had amazing men along the way that really helped him and developed him and taught him the right way to do things and genuinely cared for him to reach his goals, which I think, is beyond important. Us as moms, we have to do that. We have to stand behind them, support them, what they're doing. Sometimes rein them in a little bit. Like we realized probably year one of college when he was redshirting that the NFL was not going to be where my kid went. And that was hard, but he knew that his focus was then, XYZ and then getting where he wanted to be post college, all of those things. But it really went back to having the people along the way that supported him and gave him the skills, not only on the football field, but as a human being to be able to have opportunities open up. We haven't mentioned school very much. I'm a former teacher. You got to have the grades. You have to behave in class. You have to have good relationships with your teachers, your guidance counselor, your principal. Your principal needs to know you because you're a good human being, not because you're in their office. Your high school coach needs to be able, during spring practice, when those coaches are filtering in and out of spring practice, you want to be on that list of young men that he is talking to these college coaches about. You want to be active while those college coaches are there, not cutting up, not acting the fool. You want to be working and showing them because it's a tryout. Every single moment you're on that field is a tryout. And I don't think a lot of people around the country realize that. Spring football, we're in Florida. So you're from Georgia. We take football very seriously in these two states, along Texas is another one that,
Texas.
it's just very serious year round. And our kids learn that. But if you're growing up in Nebraska, you're still playing 8-man football, which is very different than 11-man football, which is very different than the
Oh,
Canadian
wow.
League with 12 guys on the field. You just have to realize that everything is a tryout. We took every camp that he went to as a tryout because you never know what's going to happen at the end of the camp. Are you going to get an offer? Are you going to get a, hey, we're going to be in touch? Are you going to get a handshake that says, hey, thanks for coming? And you walk away and you're like, yeah, I'm never hearing from that guy again. Like everything, you kinda get it, right? As you're going along, you get it, but, the way my son treated things was every single opportunity was a tryout. You didn't know at during spring practice in high school where maybe a coach was from, or sometimes you didn't even know that a guy was there because he was there quietly without his logo on his shirt, trying to get insight and see how some young men are behaving during practice. Are they going to be a problem in college? Are they going to do what they're supposed to do? So you have to just kind of keep everything in line. And I think that's the whole purpose of having this particular podcast where it's moms talking to each other is not every mom knows that. Not every mom realizes how important spring practice is. We hear grades are important, but how important are they? Can't get into Wake Forest. You can't get into the University of Miami. You can't get into Duke. You can't get into, Stanford. And I think that's important that we look at the big picture versus just how much playing time is my kid going to get? Is he going to get a scholarship? Or now, is he going to get NIL money?
Right. And to add along with the list of people that, coaches talk to when they come to schools,
Yes.
the janitors, the teachers, they all will ask, what type of kid is this? Is this, a kid that I want on my team or, at our school representing our school? They actually went through asking about, I remember one of the janitors told me, yeah, I saw one of those coaches come through. He said, Miles Fox? And, other coaches. We had a scout for high school go to one of our rival teams and ask the coach, who is the most underrated player in Gwinnett County? And that coach said Miles Fox.
Wow.
He is a really good player, but he's often overlooked because of his size. We thought that was a big deal. That was a huge deal. I said, because Miles, this just shows that people actually see you.
That's
Shows they
awesome.
see
That's
you.
actually really I've never heard that before.
Yeah, yeah. That they
Now,
actually
as a mom, that's a conversation that I would have, is that don't forget other coaches are looking out for you. They're, of course, watching your film, right? High school, they watch film obviously in high school, just like they do in college. So that's important. You
yeah,
probably, I would imagine that coach game planned around what
around
Miles
him
Fox was doing.
because he was disruptive.
Yeah.
That's what he said. He's a very disruptive force in that middle. And so that made him feel good when he found out about that. That
I'm
was
sure nobody had that
yeah.
conversation about my child in high school. Hey, that long snapper, you better watch out for him because he's coming for you. No, but I would hope they might have made nice comments about special teams, like, "Hey, watch out. That high school team actually has a special teams unit that takes it seriously." Because obviously, Jasmine and I know not every high school coach takes special teams very seriously. Heck,
Yeah. You
not
better
every
though.
college coach takes special teams very serious.
Yes, it is a very important unit. Very. As we watch football every Sunday and I'm yelling at the darn TV.
Hey, there's some kickers right now in the NFL that are just absolutely kicking bombs.
Yes, yes.
It is
They have
insane.
one job. They have one. Whenever somebody misses a field goal, I'm like, you got one job. One job. One job. You couldn't do it?
Yeah.
No,
It is hard though to kick a
it
60-yard
is.
field goal.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
of it's hard, but I still talk my trash.
Yeah, 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 of course.
Yeah,
I say the same thing. I mean, I know that, my kid had one job, and that was to snap a football exactly where it was supposed to go,
yeah.
and even when he didn't do it exactly perfect, I was judging him in the stands just as
The
much as
pressure.
I do not miss the pressure. Do you,
Yeah,
Jasmine?
No.
the
And that's a
pressure.
whole nother part of it that people don't you almost sometimes as a parent, you wear that pressure in the stands, and it's almost you feel like it's an extension of you that's on the field, when really it isn't. But it's just that stress
Yes, it
of,
is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. They get out there. He snaps the ball. He messes something up. You don't know who you're sitting around, so you have to be quiet
right.
because unless you know that that's his mom, you're gonna be like, "Are you serious? Did he really just miss that?" Oh, yeah, it's the pressure. That's on the parents too because you're looking around like this. I know somebody's saying something. Who got that foul? I'm telling you because you just
Yeah,
don't know
it
all the parents.
Yep, that's very true. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and so I wear a glucose monitor, which is way too much information, but you can see my numbers. I might have eaten gloriously that morning, but come college like, come noon, no matter what, because we still have friends that are snapping, you will see my blood sugar go up from adrenaline. Oh, yeah, Friday night in the stands, especially in high school, because I was a little more nervous in high school. I got a little more a little more confident in my kid in college, but I would get super nervous and Jasmine, my numbers were over like 300 and I didn't even eat anything bad. I would purposely like not eat after lunch because I knew come game time I was gonna be like 300 and I couldn't control. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. So we feel it. Our bodies feel it. I can prove it by showing you my numbers. But man, that pressure that comes and when your kid only has one job and he's only out there and all eyeballs are on him at that particular moment, they're not looking at the line. Nobody is looking at the line. They're looking at the snapper and then they're looking at, either the holder, the kicker, the punter, whoever's next in line, but it all starts, with our kid's position at that particular moment in the game, and
Oh,
so,
yeah.
my gosh. And
Stressful.
and look, I have a mouth on me. It was really bad in youth football. It got much better in high school football, and I really had to settle down in college and not let people know, but I did sometimes. I mean, we my son played at a school where the college football fans are, very opinionated, and there was a couple people in the stands that weren't in the parent section, but they were really close that I had to put in their place
No, that's right.
a couple times because I didn't wanna hear it. I didn't want other moms to hear it, and I will say always, like, not everybody can kick a football. I've tried, I'm terrible,
Yeah,
and so I respect the fact that what they do and, all that good stuff, but yeah,
exactly.
my numbers didn't lie, Jasmine. You woulda hated me. You woulda hear my Dexcom screaming at me. It was so embarrassing, but I was nervous. Adrenaline was rolling. What am I gonna do?
Yeah, yeah. You don't want anybody talking about your kid.
No, oh, no. No,
You
you
know I
don't,
don't.
you don't.
So,
So, CFL. Let's
CFL.
talk about CFL for a hot
Okay.
minute because it's different,
It is.
right?
It is.
It's a different game, although it's the same game. I know when my son picked up lacrosse, this is a fun story. Like I just said, I had kind of a mouth on me, believe it or not. And Jasmine knows this. But, anyways, I digress. Lacrosse, they throw flags in lacrosse. So I thought, I understand what a yellow flag means. It is not the same in lacrosse. So moving from American football to Canadian football, as a mom who you already said you learned a lot about and you could talk with the guys about football, how have you made the transition over to the CFL and the rules change and, how different it is over there?
The rules change. And like I said, with that contract, a lot changed as well because they always have to have, it's a percentage thing. They always have to have a certain number of Canadians on the field. So for Miles, his first year with BC Lions as a rookie, he was put on the practice squad because there were too many Americans on the field. They have Canadian fields. I mean, Canadian players, a global player, which could be from anywhere, and then they have American players. Well, I guess the percentage of American players playing initially was too high, so the Canadians weren't getting enough of an opportunity. That is the reason that the contract that came in the year that he went in took effect because they wanted more playing time for their Canadian players. They didn't want the American players who were, more than likely better players to come in and take all the slots. So that was one of the things, the percentage on the field. I even told a parent this when I saw that her son was coming up, and he was a good player who played in the NFL with the Packers for a couple of years and got some playing time on the field. He was a DN. And when he came to Canada, he got through camp and everything, but he got cut. He got cut. They had enough players, and I told them, I said, understand that there is a percentage of American players that they will put on the field, but they are going to take care of their Canadian players too. But anyway, back to that. Then for the D line, they play 1 yard off the football. It's different now, so they play 1 yard off the football.
So the whole line is a
Yeah,
yard back?
the D line is 1 yard, 1 yard off the.
That's
Yep.
weird.
And then there are 3 downs instead of 4 downs. Yeah. So I always forget that when I'm like, dang, I said, they keep forgetting that it's third down and they get off the field if they can't do anything. So yeah, but they love their football up there as well.
Do
They
they?
do
Is it
love,
is it as crazy up there?
yeah, they love their football. You see the guys in the stands with no shirts and they've got the overalls like they wear in Tennessee and stuff and the
Yeah.
cowboy hats and they're up there dancing with their beers in their hands. It's hilarious. But yeah, they've got their big football fans up there. Big football fans. So yeah.
Canadian football, bigger field,
No,
20-yard end zone,
yep. Yep.
field goals are different. If you miss, doesn't the other team get a point?
Yes, that
They
one
earn the
point
point?
I still haven't understood totally because I'm like, where'd that point come from? Yeah, if they kick that ball and it doesn't go through the things, then the other team carries it back.
Yeah, yeah, they have to carry it, right? If
Yep,
they carry it back, they get the point. If they
yep,
miss and they catch it, they get the point. 12 men on the field versus 11 men on the field, which would my mouth,
different.
I would just be screaming, "There's too many men on the
Yes,
field." I would be that crazy mom, and that would be me.
me.
Oh my gosh, that
In
would
high
really screw
school,
me
I
up.
used to do that, and then I turn around and I look at George. George would be like, I was like, I got it wrong.
That's a tough one, that's a big one.
He'd be like, I'd be like, when the quarterback, throws the thing, and I'd be like, he's what is it called when they can't remember? It's missing me right now. When he throws the ball to get away from somebody,
Oh,
grounding,
Grounding.
a
intentional grounding?
grounding. I look at George, he'd be like, I wasn't
Wrong
intentional.
sport.
Oh, they're right. I'd be like, it would look like to me, but yeah, he'd be
There's
like,
only
no.
one
Yeah.
international?
But there are a lot of differences in Canadian
Yeah.
football. So yes, that's a big one that I always forget about, Heather. I always forget about that point. Several, okay, that's right. Find me.
Yeah.
So, Cheryl, what are some things that you can recommend or piece of advice that you would give them?
Always ask people to do the due diligence, do the work, figure out what's the best situation for your son, whether it's because of his position and you want to see what the depth chart is, whether it's because of the university, because of the education and the major that your son has, whether it's because of where he, how he could possibly fit on a larger campus versus a smaller campus or whatever. But do the due diligence, do the work, and also they really, if you're a football player, mom, and your son is playing football and wants to go to the next level, you have to make sure that he gets involved in some camps so that he can play against the competition and get stronger and better, and just make sure that the work ethic is there. You have to have a strong work ethic if you're playing college football. You have to, or you're never going to get on that field,
Yeah.
because you're always going to compete. You have to compete for your position every single year. But do that work to get your child to the best place possible and just stay involved.
It's definitely not a hands-off thing. You
No,
need to be involved along the
it's
way.
not. Yep, absolutely. Do what you love. And you never work a day in your life. They work
Amen.
hard, but still it's not considered work because they love it so much. And just always work, work, work. It's always a strong work ethic is very, very important.
And then one fun thing that we want to do and kind of spotlight for each show is what are 3 things that you can't live without on game day?
That's right.
Yeah.
Honestly, Jasmine had it. I had my little clear bag. Lipstick, candy, because I didn't always want the kind of candy that they had at the thing, but I always wanted to, have some candy on there. And what was the other thing I had? I'd always have my lipstick, and the hand lotion. Hand lotion. That's right, hand lotion. And nowadays, hand lotion and cuticle oil.
You said
Can't
lipstick and
have those crusty cuticles. Oh, you got lip on. So yes, that's it. That's
that's
it for
awesome.
me.
That's awesome. So
Yes.
lipstick, hand lotion, and
And
what was the other
candy.
one? And
Candy.
candy, candy,
Yeah.
candy. You got
Yeah.
to bring candy in?
I'd always have it in my pockets, in my jeans.
Yeah, okay.
So, I always get mine in there. I'd have some Tootsie Roll pops and maybe some Smarties. The gum, they'll let you bring the gum in. The gum is fine, but candy.
Candy.
Yeah, yeah.
Jasmine, what were your 3? Or 1?
In Wake Forest, probably I always had my Wake Forest mittens with me in most of the games because it was cold.
It was cold. Yep,
So we didn't have that problem in Miami. No, not really.
at
A
all.
poncho was a big deal for us because you never know
Yeah,
when a rainstorm in South Florida is gonna roll through, and you don't wanna sit and, you don't wanna have a rainstorm roll through and you get your clothes wet, and then suddenly the sun is now beating down on you again, and so then you just feel gross. So, yeah, poncho was always in my clear bag.
because you couldn't have an umbrella.
We can't bring an umbrella in
Yeah,
stadiums.
right, because you can't bring them. Yeah,
Yeah, so you gotta have something.
cool.
All
Eh,
right, ladies, I think we should probably wrap it up. Cheryl, thank
It's
you.
been
Thank you, thank
great.
you for trusting us, and being on here and talking about not only Miles, but, your own journey. I do appreciate that. I have a new friend, which I think is super cool now. We're gonna
Yes.
be friends from here on out. I know I'm not a Wake Forest alum mom, but I'm an ACC alum mom.
yeah,
Hey,
you're
Matt.
ACC,
Okay, okay, okay.
Yes.
so you
So
qualify.
I'm in the group. I'm in the group now. But thank you seriously for being here and trusting us to just chat with us. And I know we've been talking about it for a really long time, so I'm glad we were able to sit down and finally get it knocked out.
You're very welcome, and I'm glad that you all were able to get it as well. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.